Hey, it's Jacob Berry, and this is another Dealership Fixit throwback episode where we dig into insights from some of the sharpest minds in power sports. On this episode, we're going to revisit a conversation with Bobby Whitney, who was the owner of Progressive Powersports. This episode was originally published back in 2019, but I promise you, Bobby's approach to team culture, customer service, and building a high-performance dealership is still one of the best I've ever heard and one of our most replayed. In this highlight reel, Bobby shares how he thinks about product knowledge, multi-brand selling, training strategies, employee empowerment, and why saying yes to your customer builds that loyalty. If you manage a team, if you run a store, or if you care about building something long-term in this industry, you're going to get a ton out of this episode. So let's get into it.
Give me some idea of the biggest surprises when you came in, whether it was wow in a good way or wow in a bad way, to do with power sports and maybe the sort of the status quo on how things are done.
I had both. I had wows in every direction, and I say that to my associates slash employees all the time. Of when customers come in, we need them to say the right kind of wow, because everybody can wow customers. Do you wow in a good way or bad? But really the passion that the employees have for what they do, the products we sell, the lifestyle that surrounds those things, that is something that is really different. And so from store to store, I didn't see that as much in automotive. Every luxury brand has a couple of guys that are diehards of that, car brand, but most people are just professional salespeople that sell a nice product. Where in this industry, most folks are, they really, really love whatever brand it is. They're just entrenched to the lifestyle or the brand. And so I find a lot more passion with the employees. So that was a really cool wow. Systems, processes, and softwares are about 15 or 20 years behind what automotive has. And so that was a really kind of a shocking or a low wow. So they came in all directions. And I was surprised really at the complexity being a multi-line store, because we have, pretty much every brand that rolls, we've got it. And there's a lot of stuff there's a lot of little things to take care of here, where most automotive places are one brand, and they're focused on building that brand, building the value in that brand, and selling against competitors where, frankly, I carry all of it. And so that's a different side of it as well. So yeah, the wows come in all directions.
When I was actually in Texas, I worked for one of what was at the time a Yamaha, standalone. I think they called it a pilot store. It was when North Texas Yamaha was up there in Louisville, and that was a pilot store. And that, having been in the business for 20-ish years now, you still find that there's not a whole lot of single lines. They just can't make it. They have to be anchored together, so to speak. But
sure,
you think about how difficult that makes it when you're trying to be, the sort of the personality and the branding of, a store, a franchise store, or and just a repair store that's not a franchise store. And when you're trying to be all of those brands together as well as your own brand, I guess, that would be more difficult now that you kind of put it out that way. It definitely would seem like that's a tricky and sort of slippery slope.
To try to do that and to best serve a customer while doing that, the level of experience and expertise in your salespeople is really important, because they've got to know the product and pricing, and they've got to know the competition. They've got to know all of those things, as well as the funding and the differences between the banks of all of these. And so if I've got a salesperson that doesn't have all that on lock, then that's not fair to my customer. And so they have to have a much broader sense or just level of knowledge than most folks that just have to represent, say, one or two brands.
So what do you imagine is, obviously at any point, if I ask you a question and you feel like, rather not say, feel free to do that. But sort of being in the sort of the geography that you sit in and knowing that you serve, a certain core geography, and obviously diminishing returns to a certain degree out of that for, whatever distance and money and all these different pieces of it. But where do you, as a guy entering in, how are you going to, I guess, keep it fresh for yourself? Do you just continue to go back to your core principles and keep, keeping where that distinction is made between what you've shown up and where you're headed with it?
For me, it's just making sure that I that I don't allow us to box ourselves into whatever has been or whatever is the way it's always been done. The customers will allow you to make a fair profit if you provide a ton of value for them. They'll let you, they'll spend a bunch of money with you. They won't spend extra time. So trying to find efficiencies in our process from a service or sales side is probably the thing I will focus the most on. Is how can I get information to customers faster? How can I get service returns back to customers faster? How can I do things that will be at the speed of the customer instead of them waiting on me? So if I can continue to refine that, it'll probably introduce to me different challenges and things for us to overcome that might lead us in other directions and ways to get better.
You and I had talked about, before we went on the session here, we had talked about some things. And one thing that jumped out at me was when you were talking about in the automotive, luxury automotive and sort of the high level of scale sort of operation that you were a part of, and the expectation from the owners of all of you to do CE, continuing education, and have a certain amount of that done every year. And to me, like my wife works in insurance, and for her, it's part of what they expect, part of what they have to do, and for me, where I sit with what I do every day, we have a certain amount of continual training that occurs. But I remember my years at dealership, and there was no such thing. It was, I guess there probably is much more so today, because the manufacturers may provide a login to a thing where you can get, their specific training and attain a certain certificate or whatever. And obviously technicians are, I feel like, probably the most likely example in power sports to be held accountable to that sort of continuing education. But is that something to carry over? Do you carry that over to other folks? I mean, what's that? Is that
absolutely,
okay?
Absolutely, because if you've got, if you have trained associates, if you pour into your associates, they're going to feel more part of the team. They're going to feel like you're investing in them. The stuff that the manufacturers provide, huge, valuable assets that they provide for stores. If we're being honest about the way those are consumed, typically they're started and clicked through while something else is going on, and how much learning is actually happening there. And I think it's the best way to disseminate information, the way the manufacturer does it. But does someone really sit there for 30 minutes or an hour and focus 100% on that class, or are they clicking through it so they get their certification and they can get their spiff card or whatever? And so if my guys are doing the same training that everyone else is, what separates me? What separates a customer when they come in here? They feel like something's different. They don't know what it is, but something's different. And so that goes back to that empowerment side, but it has to go back to the training side as well, because if my guys don't know anymore and aren't trained any better than the store down the street, then we are just the store down the street. And so I think you get more loyal employees and more loyal customers every time you increase the level of training. And it's not always easy, because the guys think that that's a non-profitable way for them to spend their day. Right. It doesn't result in a sale. It doesn't fix a machine. And so we've taken that away by compensating for training time. And there's no longer an excuse. And if you are a professional with the desire for upward mobility and you want to be better and do better and make more, then I'll invest a little bit in you. It'll make you better, and in turn, you'll make the store more money, and we all win. That's my thought on how you have to do CE.
High turnover is not a bad thing. If you've got to turn people out, they're not going to be, they're not showing probably what signs that they're going to, engage and do what they need to do and kind of do that. But it made me realize, maybe you and I are on the same page about this. When I remember working as a manager here, when I tried to leave the power sports business for about a minute, a handful of years back, I went to work for Mannheim, the car auction. So I went to work for Mannheim locally because I had experience working for National Powersport Auctions. So they were like, oh, wow, this guy's an auction guy. Well, I had a year of experience at NPA, so big level, big movers of product. So I had enough to be dangerous, I guess, but they hired me as a dealer services manager at Mannheim in my local area here. But I did that, and what's funny was the way I saw, at least my direct the guys I reported to were, very much like, yeah, you tell us what you want to do. We'll tell you if you're going the wrong direction, but we want you to, not make any sort of, judgments on what we want based on what we tell you to do. So we want you to make a lot of this happen on your own. So I did. And some of the things I did included when we would be doing kind of weekly follow-ups with the team that came in to visit with me that were my direct report employees to me. They would come in and we'd sit down and talk. But one of the things I always said was, what do you want to be doing? Do you want to be here in 5 years? If you do, let's figure out, do you want to keep doing your role? Well, let's make you better at it. Do you want to do something else in the organization? Let's figure out that plan, and we'll put dots on a map, so to speak, figuratively, and get you in a direction. Or you can tell me in this closed door meeting, this isn't going to go to HR. This meeting is you and I talking about it. And if you tell me, look, I really want to be a professional knitting champion, or whatever, like, let's have that conversation. Great. Okay. Well, how can we keep you doing what you're doing here? How can I help at least guide you as somebody to say, I'm going to keep you accountable to that? And if we can get you in the, whatever the knitting races look like these days to do something, let's get you on that path. And what I found was every one of the people that I did that with, all of a sudden the guard was let down.
If someone is going to work for us or with us for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, that can be an incredible time for the store and for that person to grow. And if they are not a quote unquote lifer, that can be okay. And you invest in them the same, and hopefully they stay if they're great. If they move on to what they deem as greener pastures, you still probably have an advocate there, someone that helps you sell and helps spread the word. But it's much like a professional sports team. Nobody drafts someone to be a forever player. You're going to get X number of great years out of this player, and then they're going to move on. They're going to do something else. And it's okay if you learn how to maximize their enjoyment and their profitability and just how they impact the store. It's okay if they are in and out in a 4.5 year window. I'd love in theory for them all to stay and we grow old together and make a bunch of money and have fun. But if that doesn't happen, and it usually won't, then you just make sure you make it a great work environment and help them be successful, and they help you become profitable. And that's a pretty good trade.
Well, I think, that's, if you're at a really super small store, if you're at a store with a couple of few guys, although you're tight on actual staffing to be able to keep the doors open, if you send somebody out the door. But that's where I've always noticed is, they're very nimble. Obviously, you get to be, as you're a massive store, potentially, you have more staff and more ability to send somebody out. But that sort of the vast majority of dealerships that sit in that middle zone, I feel like they would definitely need the sort of reality shift that would be knowing that, oh wow, we are much more can-do attitude. Let's figure that out,
Sure.
And of course the wows that go with that.
Just when every customer that comes in the door, they need help, or they need a product, or they need a part, or they need service. And we've changed the philosophy of this store. We no longer turn away older bikes to work on. We just have a conversation with the customer about what their expectations should be, and we find a way to tell them yes. If it's something we don't carry or have, we locate it and find it and get it here and tell the customer yes. And just over and over, if we find a way to say yes, then they really have no other place to go. There's no other reason for them to shop anywhere else for anything else ever, because I'm just going to always figure out a way to say yes.
What's the name of the book for your previous employer, Mr. Sewell? He has a book that I think you alluded to a couple of times.
And that's really where I learned. Just a great organization, taught me almost everything I know about business and customer service. But he has a book called Customers for Life. It really is the owner's manual, or the instruction book if you're going to run a dealership at a high level. And it's something that that book, all of your managers and probably everybody else should read. And then, as far as anyone in sales or service, reading an Og Mandino book called The Greatest Salesman in the World. Those two books will give you simple insight, and all you have to do, you don't have to memorize it and do everything in the book, but if you pick one or two things out of there, you will be better. And that kind of helps us all.
Do you have anybody that you'd give an attaboy shout out to? Anybody that, whether it's power sports or otherwise, that you'd like to say has been instrumental in putting you where you're at?
With already mentioning my previous employer, that was where most of it came from. But once I got into this business, there's I've had some really good communication with the reps from the different manufacturers, and so Jim Vaughn from Kawasaki has been awesome at helping us kind of pave the way. Rob Dewey with BRP Can-Am also has been great with that. There's a couple guys from Tucker as well. JJ from Tucker and Rob Kitchens from Tucker both have kind of helped us steer our selection of product. I didn't know anything about this stuff except I enjoyed riding and being outdoors and all of that stuff. Right. So to me, all of this was brand new. So to have some folks in my corner that had been in and around dealerships and in and around power sports, that helped a ton. And then I stepped into 2 stores that had a ton of tenure, technicians, especially technicians that have had 10 or 15 years worth of experience that I just so respect how much information they have to have in order to fix. We've got 7 different brands and iterations in years. There's thousands of machines they have to have knowledge of. And to see that has been pretty cool. So I've learned a ton from those guys as well.
Thanks again for listening to this lost tape of the Dealership Fixit podcast. These guest interviews still hit hard, and we're bringing them back re-edited, sharpened up, and focused entirely on what matters, helping dealerships like yours improve, grow, and win. If you got something out of this one, hit that share button or forward it to a dealership friend who needs it. And make sure you're following the show so we can keep bringing you more content like this with convos with people shaping the power sports industry. Catch you on the next one.
Still guessing what to pay on a used bike? Still holding aged units that just won't move? It's time for a real system. Moto Hunt's ultimate used inventory playbook shows how the best dealers are finding better inventory, pricing trades right, and turning used bikes faster with fewer mistakes and more margin. It's short, real, and free to download right now. Visit dealers.motohunt.com to grab your copy or check for the link in the notes.